I speak to the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Well, I'm interested to know how everyone's Lenten disciplines are going. I'm going to take that as a sign. Now and in the hour of our death, right? We're through the first half week of Lent. We have our traditional scripture readings about resisting temptation, about Jesus spending 40 days in the wilderness, just as the Hebrew people spent 40 years in the wilderness before finding the promised land. We're reminded that we have almost the entirety of Lent to go still until Easter. So again, how's it going? However you're doing, just remember that the most important thing is not where you start, but where you end up. Okay? Don't give up even if things haven't started well. Make each day a new start, and remember that not one of us is Jesus. Now, what I really want to talk about this morning is semiotics. Is that okay? Have you ever had someone ask you, what's your sign? Yeah? Or seen on TV? Then you tell them, I'm a Taurus. And they look at you with those knowing eyes and smile politely and say, that figures. And that used to be good enough, but now there are more questions like, what's your moon phase? Or like, what's the planet that was ascending when you were born? And honestly, I'm making this part up because I really don't know that much about astrology, but people who take astrology seriously have a whole host of knowledge about certain details of your birth and what they mean. This is a form, but not the totality, of semiotics, okay? Semiotics is the study of symbolism and how symbolism works. It's a theory that underpins how people like astrologers or artists or writers use signs and symbols, how they work. The use of one object to depict another object or an abstract concept is as old as sentient life. It's not just a human thing. Animals do this too. It begins with our need for survival. A rustling of leaves warned our primitive ancestors and prehistoric animals danger. And that's a sign, right? The rustling of leaves represents the possibility that something in the bushes could eat us. It might be hiding nearby. We better be aware. A baby's cries tell us that our children need food or that they need a change of diaper. That's also a survival mechanism. It's a sign, an audio cue that stands in for some other information that we need to know. In our current culture and in many places around the world, if you are driving on the road and you see a red octagon with or without writing on it, whether it says stop in English or it says stop in another language or doesn't say anything, you can be pretty sure that it is a sign that means don't roll straight through this intersection. It might cause an accident. The sign stands for the instruction, right? You can see the sign and you know that it has a meaning beyond just its shape. So I think we get that. What we see with semiotics then is a double layer of meaning. There's the thing that we see on the surface, and then there's what's lying underneath the surface. Interestingly, the first philosophical exploration of semiotics did not begin with poetic symbolism or sculptures, iconic images, with frescoes or mosaics. It didn't start with music, and it didn't start with any other form of ancient art. Can anybody guess where the study of semiotics began? Anyone want to take a hint or take a guess? Come on now. Huh? The Lascaux Caves? Could be. Yep. So they used signs, but they might have just been using them subconsciously. The study of signs was in medicine. As far as we can tell, semiotics was first explored in the writings of philosopher and physician Hippocrates in the 5th century BC. He was the first person that went, I see these things, but how do they work? He's a guy from whom we get the Hippocratic Oath, right? If you study medicine or if you become a doctor. And as you can imagine, in ancient cultures, when someone got sick, the solution was most often a religious one rather than a medical one. This is because disease does not usually present itself fully to human observation. Things like bacteria and viruses are too small most of the time for us to see. And so, if there was a plague, it was not from a tiny microscopic organism that hitched a ride on a flea-bitten rat. It was the god Apollo who was angry and shooting invisible arrows at the victims of the malady. We look at these things and maybe we scoff, maybe we say that's so superstitious. Our ancient ancestors did these things and they didn't understand true medicine. But our ancestors were not stupid, otherwise we would not be alive. Am I right? This is part of the reason that we have taboos, actually. Prohibitions like the one that we get in our Genesis reading, or the laws about which Paul is telling us in Romans. Don't go to that part of the river, it has evil spirits. Do not covet your neighbor's property. Do not eat from the tree in the middle of the garden or even touch it. We often hear these things in our modern world and we think how silly it is to have these kinds of prohibitions, these religious prohibitions. Like they were simply put into practice as a way to curtail our freedom. And perhaps, sometimes that is true. But semiotics tells us that perhaps there is some unspoken wisdom beneath the surface that we're ignoring if we just dismiss the sign or the symptom as spurious and controlling. You may remember the story I've told about Wangai Matari, the Kenyan environmentalist who grew up hearing her tribal elders say, you can cut down any tree in the forest, but never cut down a fig tree. Do you guys remember that story at all? Even maybe a little bit? Well, so this is what happened. She thought that it was superstitious. She thought it was nonsense. But later in life, as drought and famine began to affect her land, a symptom caused by the deforestation of her homeland, she came to understand that of all the trees in the land, the fig was the one whose roots brought water to the surface for every other life being. You can cut down any tree in the forest, but don't cut down the fig tree. It's not just a prohibition so that somebody can have control, but it's a pre-scientific folk wisdom about the proper balance of an ecosystem. In life and culture, as in medicine, there are symptoms and there are the causes of symptoms. There is a sign, and then there's the thing that the sign represents. So for the rest of our time together this morning, I want to focus on two things, two crucial learnings from the discussion of semiotics. And the first one is this: never confuse the symptom for the thing itself. Okay? Never confuse the symptom for the thing itself. And the second one is don't ignore your symptoms. So let's start with the first one. We should never confuse the symptom for the thing itself. Earlier I asked you, all of you, how your Lenten disciplines are going. And I want to ask you a sort of provocative follow-up question about that now. What if your inability to hold to your discipline is the symptom and not the thing itself? What if your inability to hold to a Lenten discipline is the symptom and not the thing itself? In trauma-informed care, we talk a lot about behaviors, about covering emotions, and we talk about triggers. So what these three things have in common is that they are the symptom and not the thing itself. A behavior is an outward expression of something that is happening inside of your body. Do you have too much pent-up energy? Is there something happening in your life that you cannot talk about to anybody else, and so it comes out sideways somewhere else in your life? Do you just need to sing like no one is listening and you're actually in a room filled with people who are listening? Do you really need someone to pay attention to you, but you're being ignored or you feel invisible? These things and more will bring out a behavior, but the behavior is not the thing itself. It is the sign of the thing. And so when we punish, like say we punish kids for their behavior without understanding what it is going on beneath the surface, it doesn't actually change anything. So if you gave up chocolate for Lent, let's say, you may need to notice that the behavior of eating chocolate is tied to something inside of you that's deeper than just a love for chocolate. If you struggle to keep that discipline, it may not be a failure against temptation, but it might be confusing the symptom for the thing itself. Likewise, a covering emotion, especially something like anger, is a symptom of something that's happening inside of you. A few years ago, when I was doing some continuing education around parenting and emotions, we were given one of those iceberg models. Do you know what that is? You get a poster and it's got an iceberg on it. I don't know if you've ever seen it. We do it in the College for Congregational Development as well. The iceberg model is this idea that above the water is some ice, and you can see that. It's on the surface of the water. You can see the iceberg, but actually the majority of the ice is below the surface. This particular iceberg was focused on the emotion of anger. Above the surface are a few things like anger, like frustration, like rage. But below the surface were about 40 undercover emotions that actually express themselves as anger. So things like disrespect might come out as anger. Loneliness, grief, shame, danger. If you're feeling fear, that might come out as anger. Helplessness, powerlessness, anxiety, embarrassment, sadness, and on and on and on. There are multitudes of emotions that might just come out as anger if you're not paying attention to what's actually going on below the surface. What the iceberg shows is that the larger anger behavior, or the anger emotion, just like a behavior, is the symptom of something that's happening inside. It's not the thing itself. And so if you've ever tried to give up anger, but you have not tried to explore what makes you angry or manifests as anger in your life, then you may have failed to hold your temper even though you did everything possible to try and hold it in. The final piece of the puzzle then, of the puzzle of symptoms that masquerade as the thing itself, is to talk about triggers. A trigger, as the metaphorical symbol implies, is the thing that sets off a reaction. This is the sort of between symptoms and the things themselves. We each have things that signal to our brain a certain state of being. They're often deeply subconscious. A certain situation subconsciously puts us in a state of fear or a state of anxiety or joy, and that's all because it reminds us of a past experience. I may personally love a big hug. I come out at peace and I want everybody to hug me. And I want to give everybody hugs. I like a big, huge bear hug. Because to me, that feels like inclusion, and it feels like love, and it feels like comfort. But imagine if you approach someone who has experienced abuse with a big bear hug. That may trigger bodily memories of confinement, of powerlessness, or of some other trauma. Am I right? That bear hug, then, may trigger a behavior or a covering emotion. You might get anger. It could be that person explodes. It could be that the person who's visiting your church for the first time, they don't feel safe anymore, and so they don't actually say anything. They just never come back. Right? Whatever the response is, it's activated by the trigger. If you have struggled with a Lenten discipline, could it be that your behavior or your emotion is being triggered and you have not addressed the trigger? In all of these things, the behavior, the covering emotion, the trigger, if we mistake the symptom for the thing itself, then we may have a hard time gaining freedom from that thing. And Lent is all about freedom. And isn't that the same that we deal with sin? Sometimes we take the surface level sin and we think, if only I could stop doing this. The Christian idea of sin, though, is much more complex, and most people don't really give it credit for that. The Apostle Paul tries to clue us in. He says, for the most part, we have received this idea that sins, plural, are the real problem. Lord, I sinned today in these 50 ways, or Lord, look at those sinners living in sin. They always do the same 50 things against your holy law. But actually what Paul shows us, especially when he talks about the sin that clings so close, is not the individual sins that we all commit, but the singular sin with a capital S, what theologians have called original sin. Notice how Paul talks about the one sin in our reading today. The one sin and the one free gift. They're juxtaposed to one another. For the judgment following one trespass brought condemnation, he says, but the free gift following many trespasses brings justification. Later in Romans 8, Paul will talk about his inability to do the thing that he wants to do. He finds that there is some flaw in his human nature that leads him always to do the thing that he does not want to do. Our individual sins then are a symptom of a deeper problem that we have as human beings. They're not the thing itself. So many people stop at the surface. This would be like saying that the things that were offered to Jesus were the real problem in our gospel lesson today, as if eating bread or trusting in God or having power is somehow evil or sinful in itself. The sin is not the symptom, but it would have been replacing God with the tempter as God. That is the real danger and the real temptation that Jesus is facing. Notice that the devil offers him angels to catch him if he jumps off the temple. That wasn't a problem because at the end of the reading it says, after Satan left, the angels came and waited on him. So that can't be the problem, right? The angels coming can't be the problem. The problem is the underlying thing. Are you replacing God with the thing that has tempted you? So the question is not about the symptom, it's about what the symptom represents. And so along these lines, we often hear things about how certain ways of life might be sinful just in their very nature. Have you ever heard somebody say that? You look at somebody else's way of life and you say, well, that's a sin. I can think of plenty of examples here, just maybe a couple. People used to excoriate interracial marriage as a sin. But how can true love properly exercised be sinful? Right? Ross Gay, a contemporary essayist and the author of The Book of Delights, talks about the perception of black loitering as an inherently malicious or sinful act. He explores how the delight of community and rest were seen as the sin of anti-productiveness in an economy based on black labor. But rest and relaxation are not a sin. It only becomes a problem when drugs that destroy human lives are part of that picture, or when gun violence and grooming become part of that picture. But loitering itself is not a sin, although it was often looked as such. In the wake of losing the beloved and powerful prophetic voice of Jesse Jackson this week, we should be reminded even more by his witness that sin is not reckoned when there is no law. Or another way of putting it, sometimes our laws make sinful what does not actually touch on the nature of what sin really is. Sometimes the symptom is taken as a sin when it's actually not the real thing at all. This is why I say don't mistake the symptom for the thing itself. So to close out, I want to get to the next part, and I want to say that if the symptom is often mistaken for the thing itself, that doesn't mean that we should ignore symptoms. They are the things that tell us that something is wrong. They are the impetus to do a deeper search, but they are not the end game. Don't ignore your symptoms because they're telling you something. We often ignore symptoms either because we have, as we've just discussed, we see them as not the real thing, or more often because we've made them seem normal. I know that I have a lot of teachers in this room, is that right? A lot of doctors, a lot of people who are busy professionals. They get busy during the day, don't always have time to take a note of what's happening within their bodies. Would that be accurate? Okay. How many times do you ignore your body when it's telling you it's time to go to the bathroom during the day? You don't have to answer. It's a rhetorical question, but I'm going to take the as a sign of the deeper problem. How many times do we ignore our body telling us that we are hungry during the day or that we're thirsty for water, and we ignore it because we have so many things to do? Did you know that if you don't drink water, it starts to send signals to your brain that you're in danger, and that might bring out behaviors in you that you don't want? When we have a kid who's having a big behavior issue, one of the first things we do at the after-school program is ask if they want a drink of water. Because that increases felt safety in the chemicals of their bodies. Our symptoms are meant to tell us something. How many people have I known or have you known who have ignored back pain or abdominal pain or changes in bodily patterns and then discovered that it was stage 4 cancer? Because we normalize the symptoms. Our symptoms are meant to tell us something. If you're struggling with something in your life, sin or otherwise, don't normalize it. Signs are meant to be explored so that you can find the deeper thing that's really happening. And do you know what our biggest obstacle can be? Individualism. Ourselves. We don't want to let anybody else in. We can learn all we need to know by ourselves without shame, without embarrassment, and without letting anybody else in. Relationships of trust and accountability, on the other hand, are the hallmark of Christian life. We don't have to fight every battle on our own. Even Jesus, on the night before he died, and in times of trouble, asked his disciples to go with him to pray. Even Jesus asked people for help. If you're struggling with a symptom of sin or a symptom of body or a symptom of I can't follow my Lenten discipline, tell someone you can trust. Maybe they can help you determine the deeper issue, or at least hold you accountable for exploring with another professional, with a doctor, a priest, a psychologist, or a spiritual director. Don't fight symptoms by yourself. Whatever they are, don't do that alone. You don't have to. My brothers and sisters, the beginning of Lent gives us an opportunity not just to talk about Lenten disciplines, but to explore how and why these things affect our lives. How the freedom that Jesus offers from sin can become even more real in our lives if we address the symptoms and the deeper issues. The crucifixion itself is a symptom of a culture, both political and religious, that was so focused on the symptoms of their time that they failed to realize the real thing that they were doing. They put the eternal love of God to a shameful and sinful death. They did that because their laws told them to. But we are more than conquerors because we know that sin and death did not get the final word. Sin, with a big S, has been conquered, but we still have the symptoms among us every day. If you are serious about living into freedom from sin, pay attention to what your symptoms are. Learn that they are not the real thing, but that they are a sign of a deeper issue. And never, never, never ignore your symptoms. And so now, in the name of the God who created you and the Christ who redeemed you, the Holy Spirit who walks this path with you and empowers you to boldness to overcome every evil. Be glad, you righteous, as the psalm says. Rejoice in the Lord. Shout for joy, all who are of true heart. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. For when the last enemy, sin, is defeated, then we will all truly be free. And to that I say amen.